where we are, Jay. It's like all snowy and stuff. Oh, go. We're in... Well, we're pretending. I'm pretending I'm in Alaska. Go. Oh, it's so cold. Oh, we are in Alaska today. Let me tell you, people, it is just so freezing. Oh, I'm just being silly. I'm just a silly head. Thank you for Retro Road Husband for reminding me that I do actually have an Alaska snow dome. This is the one that kicks off my collection alphabetically, and I think I got this. This was actually a gift to me. I got this in the 80s from, I want to say Mark McKay. It's when I worked at Newbury Comics. Anyhow, this is how I fondly remember him. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I do not like the cold either. And as some of you saw, as I've been doing my research, and it's one of those things, people, like I get so easily influenced. I mean, it is windy out today, and I'm seeing some dead leaves, and I mean, there's no doubt about it that the cold weather's a-coming here. It's not as cold as Alaska, where we will be visiting for the next, 45 minutes or so. But it's still getting pretty chilly out. And so maybe, I think this might be the last episode that I will do, not in Forevs, the last episode I will do out here in the summer/fall/ we're almost halfway through October-ish place. Next week, I'll head inside so I don't have to worry about things like, taking down the wind chimes because it was so, windy and bustling and you wouldn't hear it, and then people are doing like mowing their lawns or blowing their leaves. In any case, so yes, this is Maud Betty. It's not really as cold out that I need all my cold weather stuff, but I thought it'd be funny since I am doing my episode on Alaska. I also thought it was funny too because I wanted a cup of tea. Those of you who know Retro Road Husband, who does his things on Sundays, his live things, the PG tips. And I realized it was such a dichotomy because I'm here dressed all cold for Alaska and I'm drinking it out of what I call my Palm Springs mug. So that's where we are. So excuse me. Ooh, so cold here in Alaska. So yes, today is, I think it's episode 41 maybe? So I've been doing these, just a real quick recap for those of you who haven't tuned in before, and those of you who have been such loyal viewers along the way. You can probably repeat this with me. I started doing these Facebook Lives, Retro Roadmap Facebook Lives, in the beginning of, or the middle of March, when all the stuff was breaking loose, and I figured, how can I help? I can help by being silly and goofy, not just to my own self, but I can, spread some info and inspo, as I like to say, to everybody for a week. So I cover a state a week. This is my official tally sheet. And this is crazy, people, because we started in Maine, and we went all the way over here, and then we hopped down here. We did Hawaii last week. Now we're here in Alaska, which is not really what it is. Get on, you know what I mean? It's way up here near Canada. And then next week will be episode, the one of the last 10 episodes of Retro Roadmap Facebook Live I'm doing. And what I like to do is I do my research and I think, where would I like to go in certain states of the Retro Roadmap map worthy, vibe, much like everybody likes to watch, learn about these things. That's why you like the Retro Roadmap. And then I tell you about it. And it's pretty much almost like doing a crash course and writing a book a week. It's crazy, but it's a lot of fun. And I discover things. I always am discovering things that I didn't know, that I'm excited to share with you, because I love to discover and share the good stuff so then you know it too. It makes no sense for me to keep it all to myself. I am not the greedy type. So this is where I found in Alaska. So this is my Alaska map. I've got pins all over the place. I probably will get to most of them, and I kind of I'm very inconsistent with my marking, but we've got all sorts of things here, people. We've got places to drink, things to go to, and actually a couple of recommendations that people made. So here's the thing. If you're watching and you have been to Alaska, now I think I saw Laura Stevens, you're up there. It was nice to see you popping in because you gave me a tip that I'm going to mention, so rock on with your bad self. I just love it when people have info that they want to share about the states that I'm in. I have a bunch, but I'm always excited to learn, and it's always fun to see people connecting in the comment section too, because that's why I do this as well. So without any further ado, we're going to do Alaska episode, as I said, I think today is 41, 42, and yeah, there's some crappy stuff in my snow dome, and I'm just blaming it on the XN Valdez. Yeah. So what I thought I would do is I thought I would start by doing the kind of extremes. Like, it's an extreme state as well. It's wicked cold, as I like to say, and Maud Betty, I am not a fan of the wicked cold or even the partial cold. That's why I'm all bundled up here, though knowing me, I will probably start sweating soon enough. And what I thought I would do is I thought I would point out like the northernmost spot, the westernmost spot, the southernmost spot, which also doubles as the easternmost spot. And then we'll kind of go up here, maybe we'll head down here. And I got something funny to tell you about down here. So, as you can see, it's a wicked big state. What didn't become a state, kind of like Hawaii last week until like 1959, I believe it was. So there are some places, like everything in Alaska that I'm mentioning, I don't have a lot of things to mention that are from the indigenous cultures there because they didn't have kind of retro roadmap worthy places, but they did live there prior to the to Russians and other people coming and taking over. But in the meantime, I thought I'd share some of the more interesting points that might encourage you to go to Alaska. So we're going to start over here, and actually no, we're going to start up here because this is the furthest north, and here's a crazy thing that I did not know. This is where the Arctic Circle is, right? The Arctic Circle, and the reason I have a pin right there is because there is a sign that says like, hey, you're at the Arctic Circle, take your picture here and put it on Instagram and hashtag us, you'll love it, right? So that is, and I thought I would tell you a little bit about it. So the Arctic Circle is the southernmost latitude, right? Southernmost latitude in the northern hemisphere, which the center of the sun can remain continuously above or below the horizon for 24 hours. So at least once a year at any location, the sun is visible at midnight, and once a year, you can't see the sun at noontime. So those are the solstices, the solstice, I guess. Another thing you can see while you're up there, and not just like, hey, look at me, I'm at the Arctic Circle, but another thing that is neat about being so north in Alaska is the Aurora Borealis. The Aurora Borealis, Jay. The Northern Lights. Oh, that was a funny thing. I was joking with Retro Road Husband. I don't know if he's listening. That there were no songs about Alaska that I could get him to sing. He actually has a song called Northern Lights, but I forgot to mention that to him, so it was just kind of funny. So the Northern Lights are also the Aurorae, and also the polar lights. And that is disturbances in the magnetosphere. Now, this is not, trust me, this is not going to be a science class. All I'm telling you is that there's a reason why the Aurora Borealis has happened. They're wicked pretty lights in the sky, okay, that happen because of like crazy, really interesting sciencey things. You can read more about it if you like, but if you're looking for a reason, a kind of visual, oh my God, nature is so awesome reason to go to Alaska, that might be it, right? Because seriously, I cut and pasted this stuff, and it's like the resulting ionization and excitation of the atmospheric constituents emit a light of varying colors and complexities. Ugh. That's not my language. I speak the language of road maps and driving and just driving your lifing. He is listening, see? That clever boy of mine. So yes, that's Cliff Hillis, his Retro Road Husband. He is telling you about his picture as his song Northern Lights. which you might see if you're up here in Alaska, going to the place where you can get your picture taken at the Arctic Circle, Jay, right? So if we're moving west here, so this is crazy. I cut my map off a little bit too far because imagine, picture yourself or Google it in a separate tab, a map of the United States, or a map of the world rather. I stand corrected. Because right over here, the westernmost interesting spot I found to recommend is in Nome, Alaska. Nome, not with a G. It's like Nome without the G, Nome. And there is a giant gold panning pan. Now, we actually saw a giant chicken frying pan down in Dover, Delaware once. It didn't look as cool as I thought it would, but the chicken was really good. But here in Nome, Alaska, I don't know, Alaska, there is a giant 20-foot wide. You can't even, it's so big you can't even see my hands doing the it's so wide thing. Jazz hands. A gold panning pan to represent the fact that a lot of people went to Alaska back in the last century. Well, it's funny, I said last century, that's 20th century, 1800s, because gold rush, people, you know, I mean, it's right up here. I mean, we're bumped up right against Canada. You get the Yukon. Remember? I've got a couple of things that reminded me of, what's his name? There's always tomorrow for dreams to come true. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, that Christmas special. Everybody knows that one, right? Rankin Bass, Clarice, and the Bumble, and Hermie, who I'm going to mention in a bit. Yukon Cornelius, remember him? Nothing. So it's wicked north here, and people went to get, they wanted to get gold. So in Nome, there's a giant gold pan, a gold panning, you know, can I find some gold? And then there's also, it's right a block away from the Idiatrod race where people mush I'm totally getting myself distracted. They do the race with the dogs, you know, dog sleds races, right? And they go from Anchorage, which is way down here, they mush their doggies all the way up to Nome in this crazy, crazy race. Because back in the day, that's the only way people could get around. It was so cold and so snowy, and there wasn't the equipment that we have now to go, like, you know, like snowmobiles and planes and things like that. So they use the dogs. So if you ever want to go see the end of that race, you can go to Nome. Also, right off the barrier here, this is why I brought up the thing about the world map, is a little island called the Diomede Island, Little Diomede Island, and it's the closest place in the U.S. to Russia, besides, you know, a certain house. And it is like just a couple of miles, because there's also Big Diomede Island, and it is like 2.5 miles. So isn't that crazy? Like, you think we're not all connected, but we're all connected. Geographically, almost anyway. The Bering Strait, remember that from like school and everything? Okay, now the funny thing is I am getting hot. Hot, Johnny. Whew. Okay, so, look, give me a babushka. All right, so, okay, it's not really Alaska cold here in October of, in Pennsylvania. But in any case, yes, so you could go to Nome, you could see that. You can actually pan for gold yourself if you want to go there. So that's all the way over here if you care to do that. If you don't, we got a bunch of things that are kind of grouped together. And down here in the very, very, very south, right here, there's a place called Ketchikan. And that's the furthest south and east place. And here's an interesting thing that popped up once or more in my research about things to go visit and learn about when you are in Alaska. And I will read what they wrote about this place called, there was a place called Dolly's House. And they said, in the olden days before video games, single young men in Alaska had a different idea of after-work entertainment, hard liquor, and a certain type of female companionship, if you know what I mean. So yes, there are a few of these houses of ill repute, brothel perhaps you might call it. A lot of that going on because there was a lot of miners, a lot of gold miners, a lot of worker people, not a lot of ladies, even fewer women. And so yeah, if you are interested in going to Ketchikan, you can see what a house of ill repute was like back in the day. This was an interesting thing I found out too. It's like there was the red light district, and then there were only certain days of the week that the women who worked in these places were allowed to shop so that the other proper ladies could avoid them. Fascinating. So I'm thinking that right there, or right down there. So we're going to go up to Juneau, right here. Did you know that Juneau is in Alaska? I don't know. Did she know that Juneau was in Alaska? I don't know. Alaska. It's my vaudeville impersonation for the day. So in Juneau, there are a couple of things. So Kim Hennings, I want to give you a shout out because you were awesome in giving me a couple of recommendations, and this is one of them, which was the gondola ride at the top of, I got it, did I see? In the Mount Roberts Tramway in Juneau. You can see beautiful views going up in the gondola, and you can also have fine dining at the top, which is kind of neat. Patty Shreve, I know you just turned on, and no pressure, but I remember, I think, didn't you and Tom, you went on one of the cruises, you went to Alaska, and that probably is the way a lot of people do that, because you go up the coast, you know, there's a lot of probably wondrous, beauteous stuff right here, beauteous maximus, as I like to say, but you do go up the coast, and you see all sorts of things, and lots of fresh fish, stuff like that. But so Juneau, there is the Mount Roberts Tramway, and also, speaking of taking a cruise to Alaska, there's a Patsy Ann statue in Juneau. Now, Patsy Ann was a cute little dog in the 1920s. As my mother would say, deaf as a haddock, she would say, my mother would say. That dog was deaf as a haddock. Or my grandmother was deaf as a haddock. And they called Patsy Ann the official greeter of Juneau, because even though she was deaf, somehow she knew when the whistles of the approaching ships, she could hear those, you know, and she would trot herself down and greet the boats. And of course, she was so cute, people gave her treats, so of course she wanted to come back. And she only lived, I mean, she was like 13 years old, which is crazy, a nice old age for a dog, especially down in 1929. And she died, and yet they have a little statue of her. She died in 1942. She died peacefully in her sleep, as we all hope to go. And then about 50 years later, in 1992, they made a life-size statue of her, and I thought this was so cute, too. You pick up these little details that just make you think they're so adorable. Clippings of dog hair from all over the world. Jeff Cooper, all over the world. Clippings of dog hair from all over the world were mixed into the bronze of the Patsy Ann statue when it was cast. Now, this is why it's getting kind of windy out. It's kind of cold. It's not as cold as Alaska, but this is why Maud Betty's moving inside starting next week. There's another thing in Juneau that I want to mention before we go on, and this is kind of a road food thing, and actually I got this tip from roadfood.com, Jane and Michael Stern. Wonderful resource for those of us who like to eat unusual things. Not unusual things, but just things you can't find when you are on the road, like you can't find them at home. You can get burgers pretty much anywhere. You know, maybe instead you get like, you know, nice, delicious deep fried halibut chunks, which seems like a lot of places in Canada, the fresh fish and the crab legs, the giganto ones, like the king crab legs, sound really cool. But there's a place called Pelmeni. And again, I may be slightly mispronouncing it. I'm doing my best. Pelmeni in Juneau. And that is a traditional Russian dumpling. I love me some dumplings. Anybody ever had a pelmeni? Anybody from Russian extraction? I had never heard of them, frankly. It makes me think of kind of maybe a smaller pierogi, of which I'm so excited to get some from the local church down the street in just a couple of weeks. So good. Oh my God, I'm like Yukon Cornelius. Nothing. Something. But anyhow, pelmeni is like a tiny little dumpling. Actually, they say it's about the third of the size of a pierogi. They're filled with stuff, and then you can go to this place. It's a total, like not even old school, just very generic looking, classic, no frills kind of place that you can get these little dumplings. They say they give you about 16 or 18 of them, which I love. They boil them up, and then they throw them at you within a styrofoam cup, with a plastic spoon, and they say go for it. They put little seasonings on them. Looks really good. So that's where I would go. Like when I am on vacation, sometimes I find it's fun to just go to the little hole-in-the-wall places that serve foods you can't get anywhere. So pelmeni and Juneau. I'm speaking a foreign language. This is excellent. So we're going to move from Juneau. We're kind of moving our way up here. And again, just giving you that general idea. There's clumps of things, and there's a whole bunch of beauty. There's other clumps, and then we'll head down here. Haines, Alaska. There's a place called the Hammer Museum. And I had been so excited because somebody had said in Juneau, actually I think I read about it on roadsideamerica.com, another fabulous resource that I love to research. And they said that there was a place on the docks in Juneau where somebody had made out of nails a map of the United States. Sadly, I read some other recommendations that said it was either fenced off or it was kind of worn away. So I was hoping to go oh hey, we get nails and now we have the Hammer Museum. But there's the Hammer Museum. Stop. Hammer time. Do 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 do. Hammer time. But I digress. The Hammer Museum in Haines, Alaska is the world's first museum dedicated to preserving the history of the hammer. It opened in 2002, so pretty new, but kind of funny. It has over 2,000 artifacts on display and roughly 8,000 more in storage. So if you're interested in learning about the history of the hammer, Haines. Also, the neat place in Haines, too, that I think is adorable. It was opened in the late 1800s as part of a restaurant. There's a place called the Bamboo Room Restaurant. Now, I was all excited thinking it was like a tiki bar or something because I loves me some tiki bars. It's not. The reason it got its name is because it was part of a hotel that was also like a hotel, bar, restaurant, brothel, one-stop shop, as it were. But when the people took it over and they wanted to kind of segment where their restaurant was, the Bamboo Room, is they hung one of those bamboo curtains, the ones you can almost hear what they sound like, They hung one of those to demarcate where one part of the area was into theirs in 1953. And this place looks totally adorable, totally old school, kind of that vintage thing. They've got counter seating, of which I am a fan. They also have these funky old tables, which I'm totally like a chair snob, and I thought their chairs were kind of cool. But they also have a they're famous for their halibut and chips. So this could be a thing where you're like, oh, every time I go to a place in Alaska, maybe I'll try the halibut and chips and I'll see who has the best, an idea like that. So this is the Bamboo Room in Haines, Alaska. Also, if that sounds so attractive to you and you're just like, chuck this whole lower 48 or whatever country you're from and you want to move to Alaska, the Bamboo Room restaurant is for sale. So I say that to you to inspire you to perhaps buy it or just visit it before it goes, it might close. I don't know. That is a good segue, an awkward segue, but a good time for me to segue into reminding you that I am speaking of these places. Oh my God, it's so windy. I am speaking of these places as if they are open regularly right now. Now, I did my best to not include any places that have been permanently closed, and sadly, a number of the map pins that I had when I was originally starting my Google map that I create for every state, ones that I had put on a couple of years ago, places, I looked them up and it was like permanently closed. Thanks, COVID. But there are other ones right now that may have unusual hours. Also, just the fact that the way the weather is in Alaska, unlike here, that their summer and winter hours are totally different. So do your research. If I tell you about a place that you're like, ooh, this sounds exciting, totally jot it down and, remember it for your trip to Alaska. But also, before you go, make sure it's still around. You're going to be open, because I've been there. I tell people to do the research and then I forget it, and then I drive to a place and they're like, oh yeah, we're always closed on Tuesdays. And I'm like, didn't know that. So do your due diligence, and that's it. Okay, so that was the Bamboo Room. Skagway. Skagway is a place that I want to tell you about, the White Pass and Yukon Railroad, because this was another recommendation. I think, Kim, you gave this to me. Thank you so much. And it's so neat because it's one of these things that was originally a train that helped them, move people, but more so move stuff from one place to another in the the late 1800s, early 1900s. Then it closed down because things got better. They had planes and they had snowmobiles. They didn't have to use the dogs, things like that. But then they reopened it a number of years later, probably in the early 20th century, early 21st, and they turned it into one of those cool old trains that you can take and do like the scenic route, depending upon where you're from. That is the Skagway, Klondike, Gold Rush, White Pass, and Yukon route train. And then you can see the beautiful, all the landscapes and stuff like that. I'm such a built environment type gal that I often have time. I almost struggle with how to explain the beauty of nature because I'm in nature more than I ever have been, but I'm still used to looking for things that people built. So while we do that, that's all in kind of this neck of the woods for Alaska, right? And I thought what we would do is kind of shoot up to here because right here I thought this was really cute. There's a little bench at the Alaska-Yukon International boundary. I said border and boundary. And there's a rest stop bench meets right there. Somebody mentioned to me, they're like, oh, it's like there's the bench and it's got like one side is kind of technically in the U.S. and the other one is kind of technically in Canada. And they're like, oh, maybe you could put like one cheek in each country. And that would be neat. Maybe you could meet a friend. Maybe you could you're sitting there on the American side and then a Canadian sits there and you have a conversation. International relations people, it begins one person at a time. So that's that. So if you want to go, that's right there on the international border. Now up here is a fun little place. Now again, this isn't really, really, really old because everything in Alaska is fairly relatively new. And I say relatively new, meaning like in the last 120 years or so when, Russians came over one side, U.S. came, and we all kind of said to the indigenous people, hey, we're here now, we're going to build some stuff. Excuse me. I'm warming up with my mug of Palm Springs warmness. So I wanted to talk to you about Mukluk Land because Mukluk Land was really only opened literally in the past maybe 30 years, but it's so cute. It's just one of those goofy places. It's named after Mukluks. So those of you, I don't own them or else I would kind of throw my foot up in the air and show you, but they're like these soft boots, kind of like Uggs maybe, but not really like Uggs. Ugg. But it's named after Mukluk boots, and it's just a unique destination. And that's why I'm moving inside next week, so cars don't drive by and interrupt me. They've got a thing here. It's one of those kitschy kind of, it's got a little bit of everything. They've got mini golf, they've got whack-a-mole, they've got skee ball, they've got Santa's rocket ship. I didn't even know Santa had a rocket ship, but he did, and he parks it at Mukluk Land. There's a crazy collection of dolls I saw, which is kind of creepy, but kind of neat. They say they rescue them from the dump and then repair them, and they're all there. And they also have just all sorts of fun things to do. And there's not a lot of, kind of roadside kitsch in Alaska. So when you see it, you jump on it, or jump in it, because they also have a bouncy room. So that's Mukluk Land and T-O-K, Alaska. Now, speaking of roadside kitsch, this is probably the number one. Yeah, now I'm singing another song. North Pole, Craig Nye. I bet you would like this place. I thought of you when I wrote this down. Santa's house in North Pole, Alaska. Who knew? So I love this. It opened in 1952, and it was just an idea somebody had to be like, hey, it's going to be Santa's house, and what we're going to do, it's the place where you send your mail and it gets stamped North Pole. So if the kiddos are writing letters to Santa, that's where you mail them, and if Santa sends a letter back and it has a little North Pole postage, that's where he sends it from, and I just think that's so cute. So that is Santa's house in North Pole, Alaska, since 1952. And if you visit there, you can also visit there. And the neat thing is, think about this, you can also buy postcards and things to share at home. Yeah, I thought that would be I thought that would be something you liked, Craig. I was thinking of you because you have showed up pretty much for all of these episodes, so I made sure to include that. There's also, and I know this is something that all of us like to do, though I'm trying to wean myself off of it, like all sorts of gifto things. Like I'd probably go there looking for more, like another Shako maybe. They've got fudge, they've got gifts, whatever, made in Alaska items, things like that. They also have a world's largest Santa. Now, I don't go around measuring how tall the Santas are, but according to them, it's the world's largest Santa, over 50 feet tall. So you can take a picture of him, put it on Instagram. You can get yourself next to it saying, oh, geez, look at how tall Santa is. And hey, what a great idea for like a, what do you call it? Like a Christmas card. Get your picture taken in front of it and boom, you're there. And doesn't that just sound like a lot of fun? So that is Santa's house in North Pole, Alaska. Another thing, so this was so funny. So I'm there zooming in on my Google map, right? Saying, okay, there's Santa's house. And I zoom out ever so slightly. Now, this isn't a place that I would necessarily recommend you go unless you have like a toothache or something. We had a friend who had a toothache when we went to Palm Springs, and boy, was she was bummed about that, but boy, were we glad there was a dentist there. But check this out. Speaking of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Rankin Bass, all over the place, there's a place called the North Pole Dental Workshop. And any of you who know that wonderful, like, holiday tradition of watching that movie know that Hermie the elf, didn't want to be an elf. He didn't want to work and make toys. He wanted to be a dentist. I want to be a dentist. And I thought that was so great. And so I saw that and I thought, gosh, maybe Hermie's there. Or maybe they have like a picture of Hermie there. That would be so awesome. So that's the North Pole Dental Workshop. We are Santa's elves. You know, this won't hurt a bit. Oh, I cracked myself up. I think I'm cracking up the little kids walking around too. So that is North Pole. And then in North Pole, before we move on to Fairbanks, one last place if you want to eat, and you want to eat in a new but looking old vintagey type diner, the Shiny Diner, the new versions of the Shiny Diners. There's a place called Little Richard's Family Diner. Now, it was not owned by the Little Richard. It was probably owned by a Little Richard. But there's Little Richard's Family Diner. It's one of those shiny diners, black and white check floor. You know the drill. But, you know, if you're looking for a place for breakfast, that would be the place to go. But also explore some of the places that are around that maybe are like kind of a discovery. You know, like have that as a backup. Or maybe it's your destination if you love those shiny diners. But also go exploring, as I like to say. So Fairbanks. Douglas Fairbanks? No, Fairbanks, Alaska. We're going to talk about a couple of places in Fairbanks. Like, for example, the C&J Drive-In. Now, here's a funny thing. This is a place you drive your car in, you see pictures of it, and it's got vintage cars outside, and they've got car harp service, and I'm thinking, whoa, this is great. This place has been around, must be around since the 50s. Yeah, no, it was opened, where did it say? Opened in like 1980-something? 1983, which was really just a few years ago. You know what I'm saying? So that is the C&J Drive-In. So that's where you can get your burgers, your fries, your things like that. Or if you want to go, please do explore some of the local restaurants that may not fit the retro roadmap worthy umbrella, but if they're independently owned, mom and pop, you know, delicious foods and things like that, support your local community even when it's not your local community. Lindy, is that the place you were talking about? Oh, that's so awesome. I love that. Yeah, Lindy and I, we are friends. We saw each other last night at yoga in the park. And she told me, and I never knew this about her, that she had been to Alaska. So I love that. If somebody said, has Lindy been to Alaska? I would have said, no. Alaska. I'm crying. Another place in Fairbanks you might want to check out, mainly for the crazy, awesome vintage sign outside, is the Mecca Bar. Now, the Mecca Bar, honestly, looks like a dive bar. We've all been to them. I bet they might even allow smoking in there, but it's got a cool sign out front. And if the mood strikes, that might be a place that you want to check out. We're in your Fairbanks. It's been around for absolute decades. It shows. It's a fun, probably no frills, like come as you are type of place. The Mecca Bar in Fairbanks, and definitely take a picture of their neon sign. Okay. the Fairbanks Ice Museum. Now, this was fascinating to me because, as you know, those of you who tuned in right at the beginning, my Betty does not like the cold, okay? That's why I'm all bundled up and wearing my winter clothing here, even though it's only October in Pennsylvania. I'm pretending I'm in Alaska. So they have these ice museums that it's so cold there that they make stuff out of ice, like ice sculptures, and you pay to go in and you walk around and you see these things. The crazy one about the one in Fairbanks Ice Museum is that it's in an old Art Deco movie theater. Now, is that not kind of nutty, wacky, cuckoo? I mean, it's in the place. It was the Lacey Street Theater in Fairbanks, which was built in 1939 as a place to see movies and probably vaudeville, if the vaudevilles even got up there. It was part of a chain, and it closed in 1981 and was repurposed into the museum into 1992. Now, I will say, when it's cold out, I don't want to go to the movies. It's hard to get me out of the house, so I can see why a movie house may not do so well. The building itself is on the National Register of Historic Places, and you can actually go in, you pay, you go in, and you see ice. I've got another place to mention that is got some ice sculptures, which there's a little tweak on that one, which I thought was kind of fun. So this will not be your ice sculpture thing. I would be hard-pressed. I would be so bundled up to go to one of these places because, as I said, I'm more like Palm Springs than Alaska. But doing this kind of research reminds one of us, those of us, all of us, it reminds everybody, including myself, to pay attention to what you like to do. And if the cold does not appeal to you, find a warm place to go, or don't go to the cold places. I mean, I'm not going to say no. If somebody wants to send me on an Alaska cruise, I am there. And part of me kind of wants to see all 50 states. I don't know why, just because it's a list I want to complete. But yeah, so that's a place you could go in Fairbanks. The other place in Fairbanks, pardon me, my little lap blanket thing just fell. Look at me. I'm like Edie Sedgwick, but not really. The Turtle Club. So the Turtle Club in Fairbanks, or Fox, Alaska, is kind of a one of those tried and true, like supper club-y type places where they've got your prime rib, they've got king crab, stuff like that. There are no turtles on the menu. The turtles all have to do with a secret, hidden kind of agenda, like a secret club of drinking people. So are you a turtle? You'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, the Turtle Club in Fairbanks looks like a fun place to go get that kind of old school steakhouse vibe. This was a neat place too in Fairbanks. And a lot of these places like say Fairbanks, but it's not all downtown. Some of them are a bit further afield. Like, where's my map here? Oop, I put my teacup on there. And, I was going to show you my map, but my little pins are kind of all over the place. But the Aurora Express bread and breakfast. The Aurora Express bed and breakfast is in kind of the Fairbanks area, and it's made out of authentic Alaska Railroad cars. So that would totally be an interesting, fun place to go stay, as long as they have heat, which of course they do. Speaking of places to stay, Laura Stevens has one to recommend for those of you who are a bit hardier of stock than I am. But I would just think that would be so much fun to go there and stay in an unusual hotel known as the Aurora Express bed and breakfast. Yeah, that's how you say it, right? So here's the other ice museum I want to tell you about. Now, this is definitely a bit off the beaten path, the Chena Hot Springs restaurant. Now, Lindsay, I don't know if you're still watching. I know you talked about some, you had gone to some hot springs, and I'm thinking, ooh, freezing cold and hot springs, that's going to be such a dichotomy because you want to stay warm, but then you can't be warm and get into the hot springs. But the Chena Hot Springs is the largest year-round ice environment it has the Aurora Ice Museum. So another one of these kind of kooky ice museum, like let's make ice sculptures and keep it really cold and then people go see them. The fun thing about this place is that they have a bar that you can sit at. Now, I don't know, your bum would probably get cold on like an ice, bar stool, but they sell, you can get like a martini or an apple teeny, I think they specified, I don't know why. You can get an apple teeny served in a glass that's made out of ice. So it's so cold. It's made out of ice. They pour your drink in it. You drink your drink, and then you can smash your glass to the ground. And you can do that because your glass is made out of ice. I think that's kind of a hoot. I don't think you should get into the habit of doing that because then, well, you're going to lose some valuable stemware and piss off some people whose houses you visit. But at the Chain of Springs Hot Springs Resort, you can do that at the Aurora Ice Museum. And you can go to their hot springs resort there too. You can stay there. And it's so funny. They say it became famous for curing crippled prospectors of their aches and pains. Well, oh my gosh, I can imagine. Can you imagine being a freaking prospector back in the day, hauling all that stuff with you, probably not even bathing at all, like any kind of hot water. Also hot springs water, but to get like a nice hot bath, that would just cure my ills as well. So that is in Fairbanks as well. Now, this is the place I'm going to mention, and I totally am giving props to Laura Stevens to remind us about Denali. So Denali, Camp Denali is at Denali, the mountain, and it used to be called Mount McKinley, right? Now it's Denali. There's a whole story about the naming and all that. As I say, Google it, youngsters, or not so youngsters, because I don't want to waste your time telling you all about the history things, but you can find that easily on the interwebs. And Mount Denali, used to be known as Mount McKinley, people, is the highest mountain peak in North America with a summit elevation of 20,310 feet. Now, I will say this, that is 6,190 meters. I say that specifically to Jeff Cooper, because he usually tunes in from the UK, and you're all metric and stuff. So that might be like, oh, that many meters. That's a lot of meters, right? So Laura, who I've known forever, I want to say back since Mrs. Feely's maybe, she said to me, she writes, Camp Denali and Denali, they have cabins with electricity running from gas. They have heat from the stove, and you have to use an outhouse, but they do have hot showers. It's in the middle of kind of nowhere. And a lot of things there's a lot of nowhere-ish places in Alaska, but she said she had the best sleep she's ever had there. And those of us who maybe, sometimes don't get as much sleep as we'd like to, a whole nice night of sleep, that sounds really nice. I would totally do that. So that is Camp Denali at Denali Mountain. And of course, if you are the type of person who wants to go mountain climbing and you want to do the hiking and you want to do all the outdoorsy things, there's plenty of that. There's a lot of that to do in Alaska. I'm not mentioning a lot of it, frankly, because I'm a bit of a baby when it comes to that type of thing. I'll take a walk, and if I have to jump over a rock, I'll call it a hike. But there's plenty of that to do. So if that's your jam, more power to you. Research that, and there's going to be tons of that stuff. But I want to make sure I get to some of these places. And I'm actually surprised, frankly, at how much developed stuff that I did find in Alaska. Now, as you can see, and it's not to scale or anything, my pins are very centrally located. So when things are there, they're in bunches. And there are hundreds and bajillions and quadrillions of acres of just wilderness and mountains, things like that. So if that type of, unsullied by humanity beauty is yours, now I'm going to get, actually, it's so funny. I'm telling you that, and then I'm going to be like, there, go visit it. So it ends up getting sullied. Oh, humans, we're such a wacky bunch. But I digress. A place that I believe it was Kim mentioned as well that I had on my map that seemed like a goofy place to stop, especially when there's not a lot of roadside attraction, is a place called Wall Mike's. Not Walmart, where I would never recommend you go to, but Wall Mike's. It's in Trapper Creek. And it's a quirky little gift shop that somebody opened. Oh, excuse me. It was Kim. Maybe you mentioned it, but Natalie Lanes. I wanted to give you a holla because you tuned into the Retro Roadmap Instagram page. Speaking of, if everybody just double check, y'all. See if you're following me on the Instagrams, because I noticed that I was right near some sort of momentous turning over of the clock. I'm gonna have 500 viewers as opposed to 499. So if you want to tidy those numbers up for me, go over to the retro underscore roadmap on the Instagrams, and if you follow me there, that would be awesome. Thank you. Anyhow, wall mics. Natalie Lanes mentioned it when I posted about where to go in Alaska. And again, it's just like this quirky shop that's got, I think it's got like a hand. Ooh, it's got a hand that's in a jar. And you can buy crazy stuff, and it's got wacky signs up. And it's just one of those unique places that you wouldn't find anywhere else. So that's Wall Mics and Trapper Keep. Now here's an interesting thing that I was fascinated by. Now this to me, I was like, ooh, I did not know this. So there's a place called Talkeetna, and I think this is where Lindsay, you might have mentioned, Lindy, you might have mentioned to go to. Two reasons I bring it up. Two reasons I bring up this little town called Talkeetna. One is that they have the Alaska Birch Syrup and Wild Harvest store. So here's the thing, people. This is my thing. I always say here's the thing. I gotta watch that. We all are familiar with maple syrup, right? Makes sense to, like, it all just doesn't, we don't even like, oh, maple syrup, of course, it comes from maple trees. It never really occurred to me until I read about this place that why don't we make syrup from other trees? Now, I'm sure there's a scientific reason or whatever, but the fact that up in Alaska, near Talkeetna, they have Alaska birch syrup. They make syrup. I was gonna say like maple. They make maple syrup. I almost said they make maple syrup from birch trees. No, they make birch syrup from birch trees. Now I would totally get that, and I would totally bring some home. I would probably totally put it on my pancakes. So I just think that is so fun. The other thing that slays me about this, and you have to admit, people who live up in a place like Alaska, you've got to be a certain kind of person and maybe have a little bit of a quirky sense of humor. You're extra hearty, you know, whatever your thing is. But Talkeetna, the mayor of this town was a cat. So I love this. Stubbs the cat won the Civic Post in 1997 via write-in votes. Now there's only 900 people in this village, and the election story, like the town doesn't even have a mayor, but they made up a story how a cat became the mayor, and then they made t-shirts and mayoral decrees pronounced behalf of the cat. I mean, I just think that is hysterical. Now sadly Stubbs died, but there is a newly elected cat mayor, and I just always laugh because, you know, it's one of those things like, you know, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. You know, it's like, oh my God, the next thing you know, like dogs will be able to vote. And I was thinking, well, the dogs haven't gotten the vote yet, but the cats have already figured out how to serve in public office. So, you know, you dogs, you might want to start, you know, picketing for your rights to vote. Because the cats, you know, it's dogs and cats. So that is Talkeetna for your birch syrup, and to go check out the cat mayor. You know, who knew? So Anchorage, we're anchored down in Anchorage. Ooh, that's the only line I know of that song. I bet Retro Road Husband is glad I did not mention that. Yeah, Cat for President. Actually, I have a Chrome extension that turns all of the pictures of the of a president to pictures of cats. I highly recommend it. Anchorage, anchored down in Anchorage. The Idiatrod, remember I talked way back at the top of the hour, as we used to say in the college radio biz, about way over here in Nome. The Idiatrod starts way over here, so they go mush and mush, 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 and starts and ends there. So you can begin, you can check out the beginning, you can check out the end of it. Thing that I thought was so neat about Anchorage, there's actually a bunch of places. There was a nice little clumping of things. That's not an official term. Actually, no, it is. It comes in clumps. I was watching a video about, oh, you know, what is that stuff? Particles and things, and it comes in clumps. I'll put it in it was like molecular biology, something crazy. Nuclear, you know, I was trying to be smart. I did a rod. You did a rod? Cliff Hillis, if you can hear me now, put in the comments, what's that video we watched where the guy was like, it comes in clumps. It was like the smart, like, science guy from the 60s. Thank you, hon. I appreciate it. I did a rod. You did a rod. You know, I mean, it's Alaska. It gets cold at night. Anchorage. We're talking about the Wendler Building. I'm talking about the Wendler Building because it's a fascinating building. It is pretty much one of the older buildings in the, it's actually built in 1915, and it is the oldest commercial building in the city of Anchorage. And the neat thing about this building, and think about that, oldest building in the entire city is, I say, you know, little over 100 years old, which may seem long like to some, but history goes back decades and centuries and things like that in the entirety world. So 100 years ain't that old, people, for a building. The thing I love about the Wendler Building is it looks cool, and then it's got this neat neon sign up on it. And the neon sign is for a place that no longer exists, sadly, but it's called Club 25. And Club 25 in Anchorage was a private club for women. And the reason they had this was because there were so many of these kind of rough and tumble men around that women really were not encouraged or feeling comfortable or maybe safe to go into restaurants and things with all these, you know, lumberjacks and burly men and less than gentle gentlemen, let's say. So some people, what's their names? Some people, the Wendlers probably, yeah, the Wendlers, you know, from the Wendler Building. They opened up this private club for women, so the women had a safe place to go and just hang with their chicks, you know, have lunch with the ladies and not have to worry about some mook, you know, ogling them, right? They did, it was an exclusive membership place, but then they opened it up to general membership, and it was a landmark of the city's social scene for decades. It is not open anymore, but the sign is a landmark. There we go. Richard Feynman. And what was the name of that? I don't know. It's something cosmic. So that is a place you want to go to in Anchorage, and that's actually where they start the I did a rod sign. Right there. So a couple more places before we sign off here, and I'm surprised at how many that I actually have for Alaska. So if you're feeling like going there, this will give you some good ideas. There's the White Spot Cafe since 1959. If you're tired of all that fresh fish, you might want to go there for like a burger or fried chicken. They're famous for their fried chicken. So get the fried chicken there. Burgers, you can have someplace else. Maybe at Sammy's City Diner. So SAMI, Sammy's City Diner, another one of those kind of old school, new school, trying to look old school diners in Anchorage. And then here's the funny thing. So there are two more places I want to mention to you. Because at this point I said to myself, my gosh, like I've been around and I've been, you know, bundled up so much in Alaska that I am ready to go head myself back down south to, you know, the U.S. But two places I want to mention real quick. There's a place in Homer, Alaska called the Salty Dog, DAWG. And Annette, thank you. I can't even read my own writing. Annette Hunsaker recommended that. Her husband went there. They encourage you to go and hang a dollar bill on the wall or the ceiling, and I recommend too. I encourage you, if you want to come to the Retro Roadmap you know, summer studio, I encourage you to come. All you need to do is like hang a 20 on the wall, and you're more than welcome to come in. So just, you know, I encourage you to come here, hang some 20s on the wall. It'll be fun. You're gonna love it. So that's the Salty Dog in Homer. And then here's a funny place that I forgot to mention until I looked at my map and I said, ah, crap. I forgot to mention this one place right out here. And the reason it was not on my 100% radar is because it's on an island. It's on the island of Kodiak. And the place I was thinking I was going to go initially, that I was like, oh, I'll totally check that out, is the Orpheus Theater. So remember in some of these episodes, I keep on talking about how, like, to get kind of a theme going or something that makes you want to, like, I want to see all 50 states, or I want to go to, you know, the westernmost part of the U.S. or whatever it is, that thing that kind of gets in your head that you say, I want to do that. And so at a certain point during some of these episodes, I've discovered theaters that are on the Orpheum circuit. And I thought, ooh, this would be another one that I could kind of add to my, you know, my charm bracelet of places. Well, then it ended up being one of these things where I looked at it and I was like, well, I mean, it's called the Orpheum, and people of the Orpheum Theater in Kodiak, please don't get bummed out at me, okay? But it just looks like a fine, pleasant, regular building. But it's also wicked hard to get to. You have to drive. What did they say? It's a quick 4-hour drive. I mean, you're in Alaska, so maybe a 4-hour drive is quick. A quick 4-hour drive from Anchorage to Homer. And then you have to only spend 9.5 hours on a ferry to get over to Kodiak, to then go to a place that you're kind of meh about anyway. Now, I'm saying this strictly from my own point of view. If you want to do that, I am not judging you. But it was one of those things where I realized that it was like when you collect stuff. Any collectors in here might know that feeling of like you start collecting and you're like, I want to get all of them. And then at a certain point, instead of them bringing you joy, you're kind of like, well, I collect these now. I guess I have to collect them all. And your excitement about them is kind of done. And when I read about this place, I was kind of like, for like 13 hours of travel, I could say I was there, or I could use those 13 hours and head south to someplace I would much rather be. So, no, as I said, I would rather, spend 13 hours and maybe hop on a cruise ship, get myself a nice bath, and start cruising myself down back to the U.S. To the U.S. Whoa, sorry. That's what I get for doing that. Because I got more states to go to, people. So here's the deal. We left here. So here we are in Alaska. Next week, episode 41, 42. I'm totally losing count, but I got it all. It's all up here. We're going to go to Colorado. And then I realized, oh my gosh, we have, and I counted them up. So check this out. Somebody is pulling into my driveway. I've got 10 states left. 10 episodes left. I will see you next week. I'm going to say, this is Maud Betty signing off, seeing who's in my driveway. And just drive your life. Bye.